Build professional skills this semester with Adobe Creative Cloud and create standout work both in and out of the classroom. Save big on professional creativity tools. Students get 65% off Adobe Creative Cloud, including Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, Acrobat Pro, and 20+ creative apps. No matter what project you're working on, Adobe Creative Cloud apps can help you take it to the next level. Visit adobe.com/student to learn more.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. This is Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show, the place for politics, right here on the Red Apple Audio Network. I am, of course, a veteran of 13 national Republican presidential campaigns, but, well, I'm a bipartisan, or perhaps I should say nonpartisan critic of both parties, and I call them as I see them. Most folks know that I have a tattoo on my back of Richard Nixon. It's not a political statement, folks. It is a daily reminder that in life, when things don't go your way, when you get knocked down, when you suffer defeats and setbacks, when you're ready to throw in the towel, well, that's the time you have to get up off the mat, dust yourself off, and get back in the game. See, the story of Nixon is a story of resilience, a story of persistence, a story of indestructibility. It's an American story. The big news this week, President Donald Trump makes good on his promise to declassify all of the records concerning the assassinations of Senator John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Martin Luther King. Now, here is the background. In the late 70s, partially because of the impact of Oliver Stone's film JFK, the American people began to realize they had not been told the entire truth about the assassination of John F. Kennedy on the streets of Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. And they set a law which called for the release of all those classified documents, with the date landing in 2017, the first year of the Trump presidency. I brought this to the president's attention. He was actually unaware of the fact that this data dump was mandated by law, and in fact all of the documents would have been released, and it was only an affirmative act by the president that could hold some of those documents or all of those documents back. We now know, he told me at the time, he told Judge Andrew Napolitano, a longtime friend of mine and a friend of this show, and he told Sean Hannity the other night on Fox that he, in the end, released about 80% of the documents, but held 20% back at the request of CIA Director Mike Pompeo. To me, of course, that is some hint of what we are to learn, but the statement put out on the official White House website said that it would take some time to release these documents. The president is committed to it. That statement says, for more than 50 years after the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy of New York, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, the federal government has not released to the public all of its records related to those events. Their families and the American people deserve transparency and truth, and it is in the national interest to finally release all those records relating to the assassinations without delay. The Presidential Assassinations Collection Act of 1992 once again reaffirmed that all records related to the assassination of JFK be publicly disclosed, and that date fell on October 26, 2017. At that time, as I have said, the president determined that he would hold back 20% of that information. Now, what will the new documents prove? I think they will cement the role of the Central Intelligence Agency. The first dump of documents told us some incredible things we didn't know. For example, we had the 1099 from the FBI to their employee, Lee Harvey Oswald. We had a memorandum from from Lyndon Johnson's FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, telling President Johnson that the KGB, Russian intelligence, had conducted their own investigation into the Kennedy assassination, and they had concluded that, well, LBJ himself was the perp. Now, in 2013, I wrote a New York Times best-selling book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, in which I documented the fact that I believe that a plot that included Vice President Lyndon Johnson, the Central Intelligence Agency, the mob, organized crime, Big Texas Oil, and the banks, the financial interests, were all involved in the murder of JFK. I also concluded that there were multiple shooters, that the government's narrative that JFK had been shot with 3 bullets, all shot from behind, all of them shot from the 6th floor window of the Texas School Book Depository building, was false. In fact, recently, Paramount Pictures came out with a documentary entitled What the Parkland Doctors Saw. Those were the doctors who attended JFK at the Dallas hospital that he was taken shortly after he was shot. And those doctors, 9 of them, by the way, still alive, or alive at the time the film was made, attested that they had seen wounds in the president that were consistent with his being shot from both the front and the back. Well, that would mean multiple shooters, and that would mean a conspiracy. Now, each one of those entities who were involved, Lyndon Johnson had the single greatest motive. He was under investigation by Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, President Kennedy's brother, in the Billy Sol Estes scandal. Billy Sol Estes was a flamboyant Texas wheeler dealer who was taking kickbacks from Johnson as Senate Majority Leader, and the investigation into U.S. Senate Secretary Bobby Baker. When we come back, we're going to play an explosive new audio that surfaced only last week that exposes who at least one of the shooters were in John Kennedy's murder, and how that shooter is tied directly to Vice President, then later President Lyndon Baines Johnson. This is going to be a hot story for weeks, folks, and you're going to be able to follow it right here on the Red Apple Audio Network. I have a team of people standing by for the release. We will bring you the latest revelations from this release the instant they go down. So if you're interested in politics, particularly if you're interested in the assassination of John Kennedy, Senator Robert Kennedy, or Dr. Martin Luther King, well, don't touch that dial, because we're going to have it all for you here, right here on The Roger Stone Show. We'll be right back.
This is The Roger Stone Show. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. We're talking about the decision by President Donald Trump to declassify all of the secret documents regarding the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King. Before the break, I said that my own book, published in 2013, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, which I'm proud to say is a New York Times bestseller, concludes that there was a plot that included Lyndon Johnson as the ringleader, organized crime, the Central Intelligence Agency, Big Texas Oil, and the banks in the murder of John Kennedy. Now, recently, just last week, a shocking new audio tape was released. A gentleman in Texas by the name of Sean Stevens said that he got this from his grandfather. Now, it is my belief that the shooter from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building is a man named Malcolm Mac Wallace. I say this because Wallace left his fingerprints on the cardboard boxes in front of the 6th floor window, which formed the so-called crow's nest from which the shooter shot from the 6th floor. Now, we know that they are Wallace's fingerprints because Wallace was arrested, tried, and convicted of first-degree murder in Texas in 1951 when he shot and killed a man named Douglas Kinzer, who was trying to blackmail Senator Lyndon Baines Johnson over information he had regarding the theft of his initial election to the United States Senate. Here is this shocking audio. The people you're going to hear are Clifford Carter, the executive director of the Democrat National Committee under LBJ, and Billy Sol Estes, a flamboyant Texas wheeler dealer, Johnson crony, and a man who went to prison for Johnson's crimes while Johnson was president, only to write his own book in 2004, claiming that LBJ was the orchestrator of John Kennedy's death. Listen to this shocking audio.
You're good about treating you today. Well, Saul, it's been a pretty touch and go situation. Lyndon and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal with that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through it this far, and I guess we'll continue to do so. Lyndon should have never issued that order to Mike, but we've had our differences, and I'm a true blue to Lyndon, as I've always been, and tried to carry out every order that he's ever given me. But this is one I'll probably never be able to forget. And the times that we've had in Texas, and the embarrassment that Lyndon had gotten from Kennedy, I guess there wasn't anything else to do but what he did.
Well, you know, Lyndon could have really hit me if he would.
Well, Lyndon's the kind of person that doesn't want to help anyone. He's all for Lyndon, and that's the way he's pretty much always been.
Well, they had me backed up on that Henry Marshall killing, and they just kind of blackmailed me to keep my mouth shut. And if I hadn't had a bunch of tapes that I'd played after he got killed, because, 17 got killed in this situation very mysteriously. And I've done a lot of time, and I've lost a lot of money, and hurt my family a whole lot. and it's really got me disgusted with Lyndon in one way. In one way, I feel real sorry.
At the end of that tape, you hear Billy Sol Estes refer to Texas Ranger Henry Marshall, a man murdered by shooting himself with his own rifle. It is Sol Estes' contention that he too was killed by Malcolm Wallace. He was investigating corruption by Senator Lyndon Johnson. The CIA, however, is deeply involved. They resent Kennedy's, what they say is his bungling of the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba. That is an invasion plan that JFK inherited from Dwight Eisenhower, a working group chaired by Vice President Richard Nixon. It included 29 Panamanian-flagged bombers that were supposed to provide air cover for the men storming the beach, flown out of Panama flagged with Cuban pilots. Strangely, the CIA would cancel that the day before the invasion, which was, of course, a fiasco. The CIA also blames John Kennedy and his brother Robert for bungling the Cuban Missile Crisis. The American people were told that the Kennedys faced down Nikita Khrushchev over the missiles he had placed 90 miles off our shore, but they knew what the American people would not know for 40 years because it was classified, that we secretly agreed to remove our missiles, our NATO missiles, from Turkey and Italy in return for a promise from the Russian dictator Khrushchev to remove his missiles from Cuba. But the deal had no on-site inspection included. And then, of course, there is the mob. They had given Joe Kennedy, the partner of Frank Costello, Joe Kennedy, Jack Kennedy's father, $1 million in return for twisting arms in Texas and West Virginia to ensure the election of JFK, and they too were double-crossed. There's so much more we can talk about. We could do an entire 3-hour show on the Kennedy assassination, but what you're going to learn from these upcoming documents is that the CIA's knowledge and involvement in the murder of JFK is indisputable, and we may learn about the involvement of a woman named Ruth Paine, who I believe was one of Oswald's handlers in Dallas, and a woman with deep ties to the agency in Langley. This is the Roger Stone Show. When we come back, Donald Trump prevented the brutal and inhumane torture and scientific experiments on animals in his first term by the federal government, and in his next term, he's going to do even more. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states. NMLSConsumerAccess.org, number 3030.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. You know, anyone who knows me and my wife knows that we are animal lovers. We have had 9 Yorkshire Terriers in the length of our marriage. Today we have 2, Mimi and Pee-wee, brother and sister. They're getting on in age, but they're still both healthy. We also have 2 cats, Lola and Oreo. And one of the things that I am proudest of in my entire political career is working with an organization called the White Coat Waste Project. This is a nonprofit that stands up against the federal government's abusive and inhumane scientific testing on dogs, cats, primates, and other animals. I worked with them pro bono, and I continue to do so because we had great success working with President Trump and Lara Trump, Congressman Matt Gaetz, and others. We were able to stop the Veterans Administration from conducting inhumane experiments on dogs. Following White Coat Project investigations, President Trump also shut down the government's largest cat lab, ended nicotine testing on monkeys, and his EPA announced they, at first time ever, plan to end all animal testing. I'm incredibly proud of the work that I have done with the White Coast Waste Project, and joining us now is their Senior Vice President for Advocacy and Public Policy to talk about not only what we have done, but what we are going to do. Justin Goodman, Vice President of the project, joins us now.
Roger, it's a pleasure and an honor. Thanks for having me.
As I said, there is nothing that I am prouder of than the work I have done with your group, and I stand ready to do more. I know you've been working to end the government's testing on dogs and other animals for many years. You've won awards from the American Association of Political Consultants for your effective winning grassroots and lobbying campaigns to expose and end this wasteful and cruel taxpayer-funded experiment regimen on helpless animals. And we accomplished so very much. Only days ago, the president's CIA finally admitted that a lab leak in Wuhan probably caused COVID. So you guys have been in the forefront of this entire issue of testing on animals from the beginning. Tell us about it.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. And yeah, again, thank you so much for your outstanding support and leadership over the years. We've scored so many huge, historic wins for animals and against government-funded animal testing during the first Trump administration. We are very excited to be working with you again to score even more wins for taxpayers and animals. But yeah, so back in April 2020, we were following the money to China because of another investigation we did, actually. We uncovered during Trump administration that the USDA was, this is all true, and it sounds crazy, but bear with me. The USDA, for over 40 years, was spending taxpayer dollars to send staff from its Beltway laboratory to China and other places and go to these disgusting wet markets, buy cat and dog meat, and then fly it back in their luggage to the United States and force feed cats kitten and puppy meat in cannibalism experiments. And this cost taxpayers $22 million. They killed 3,000 cats in this experiment, and we exposed it, and President Trump shut it down. And not only did he shut that lab down, he adopted out the cats. For the first time in USDA history, they adopted out cats, and 2 of them went to live with our president and founder, Anthony Bellotti. But that put us on the trail of this taxpayer funding for animal laboratories in foreign countries. And in early 2020, we discovered a grant that was given by Dr. Fauci to a nonprofit in New York called EcoHealth Alliance. And now we know, this is the notorious grant. They were funneling money to the Wuhan laboratory to soup up coronaviruses in a lab and then inject them into humanized mice and create super viruses that were more deadly to humans and more contagious to humans. And of course, now we know that that's probably where COVID broke out from. But in April 2020, we were the first to expose that. The story went viral. We worked with Congressman Matt Gaetz. He went on Tucker Carlson a couple days after our investigation broke. expose the world to what happened in Wuhan and Fauci's funding for that laboratory. And of course, we now know the famous press conference where President Trump went on TV a few days after our investigation and famously cut the grant on national television. And this was the grant that now the CIA, the Department of Energy, the FBI, 7 in 10 Americans believe caused COVID and killed 1 million Americans and 20 million people around the world. And of course, White Coat Waste Project, President Trump, Matt Gaetz, we were all being called conspiracy theorists and racists at the time. And now the world has finally come around and seen the truth. And again, Trump's CIA just announced that they finally released their findings saying they agree that a lab leak caused COVID. So we're happy that we're finally getting some answers and accountability.
I am sure you, as I, have seen these shocking photographs of experiments conducted by Dr. Fauci in which he took beagles, basically locked their heads into like a cage where they had flesh-eating insects that could eat the dogs alive, their heads alive. What could possibly be the legitimate scientific value of these horrific experiments?
Those photos are iconic, and that's probably the two things we're best known for are exposing the Fauci's funding for the Wuhan lab and exposing those photos of that dog lab back in early 2021 of those dogs with their heads locked in cages. That was actually for vaccine experimentation that was being conducted at a laboratory in Tunisia. And at the time, you and many people probably remember Fauci claimed that he did not fund that laboratory, and come to learn through our investigations and Freedom of Information Act lawsuits, he absolutely did fund it. And not only did he fund it, he coordinated, like he did with Wuhan, a cover-up where he circled the wagons, got his staff to make up stories and feed them to the Washington Post and other reporters who ran with this insane, baseless story that some researchers accidentally said they got funded by Fauci, but they didn't. There's, of course, we've got the receipts, and there's a paper trail from Fauci's NIAID to this laboratory, and he funded those exact experiments. And unfortunately, that was the tip of the iceberg. We've uncovered lots of Fauci-funded experiments, and even though he's gone from government, and this is why the work we're doing now together is so important, Roger, even though Fauci's gone from government, his disgusting legacy lives on, and we have dog labs where dogs are being, in the United States that he funded, where dogs are being infested with mutant ticks and being used in maximum pain experiments where they're denied all pain relief. Cats are being infected with COVID and all kinds of nightmares, both here and abroad, that Fauci signed off on and projects that are still going on. And that's why one of our priorities for the Trump administration, Trump 2.0, that we're hoping gets implemented, and I know you've been out there advocating for this as well, we need to abolish Fauci's entire division of the NIH. He ran that place for 40 years. He was obviously the highest paid government employee. He had a $6.5 billion annual budget, and he's probably tortured and been responsible for the torture of more animals than any other single person in human history.
It is truly shocking. I mean, he received a pardon, but when you receive a pardon, I know a little bit about this, you cannot plead the Fifth Amendment in any government proceeding or legislative proceeding if the government wants to question you. What else can be done to hold Dr. Fauci for his horrific record?
Yeah, I think, that's a great question, Roger. First, I think we do it to abolish NIAID, his division at the NIH, and start from scratch there. There's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse happening, and we need to get rid of it, take his fingerprints off that place. We need to defund gain of function. There was a Wall Street Journal story that came out this week indicating that the Trump administration is preparing an executive order to cut funding for or restrict gain of function research in some way. That's great, huge. We're thrilled about that. We need to defund animal labs in China. We're still shipping a lot of money to Chinese, unaccountable Chinese animal labs. We're going to defund, we need to defund these dog and cat labs that Fauci set in motion when he was still there. And we need to stop the expansion of some of these bio labs in the United States that he funded. We're actually paying right now, taxpayers are paying right now for a new laboratory at Colorado State University where they're going to import hundreds of bats. This is a project Fauci funded. They're going to import hundreds of bats from Asia into the United States and build a new bat lab in Colorado to do experiments with these bats, infectious disease experiments with diseases for which there is no cure, like the Nipah virus, like Ebola, more coronavirus experiments. So we need to just cut this reckless spending that's, caused one pandemic already, it's butchered a lot of puppies, and it's going to cause another outbreak if we don't do something about it.
If you're just tuning in, folks, we're talking to Justin Goodman. He is the Senior Vice President for Advocacy and Public Policy at the White Coast Waste Project, a nonprofit that is fighting the federal government over their inhumane and truly sick, quote-unquote, scientific experiments on helpless animals. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be right back with more of Justin Goodman.
Now, it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Roger Stone.
In these turbulent times, with our debt completely out of control and not sustainable in the long term, with the government just printing money like it's going out of style without that money being backed by anything other than paper, well, now is the time to protect your retirement, your nest egg, your IRA, or your 401k. And the best way to do that is by acquiring precious metals like gold and silver. The people that I trust are the folks at Colonial Metals Group, and you can contact them at colonialmetalsgroup.com/stone. That's colonialmetalsgroup.com/stone, or go to freegoldguide.com. They'll answer all your questions and show you how you can protect your future by acquiring gold and silver. Do it today. You'll be glad you did.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
Thanks for joining us. If you're just tuning in, we're talking to Justin Goodman, the Senior Vice President for Advocacy and Public Policy at the White Coast Waste Project. He has been leading the charge to stop the federal government's inhumane and cruel scientific experiments on helpless animals, dogs, cats, primates, and other animals. Justin is an accomplished individual with co-authored extensive peer-reviewed research on ethical, scientific, and regulatory issues related to animal testing. He received his bachelor's and his master's degree in my home state at the University of Connecticut and has been in the trenches fighting this successful fight. Justin, this cannot be done alone. President Trump has been a great champion. You mentioned Congressman Matt Gaetz, my friend, but who else has been in the forefront of this important fight?
Yeah, but, we're really lucky to have a lot of influential and smart supporters, both across the country, just grassroots folks. We have 3 million members across the country, animal lovers, liberty lovers, folks who care about wasteful spending and animal welfare and don't want to see animals tortured with their money. But we've gotten support from the first family, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Laura Trump are all supporters of our organization and have helped us score wins and expose abuses in taxpayer-funded animal labs, both in the United States and China, elsewhere. For a long time, we've been working very closely with Senator Joni Ernst, who's now the chair of the Senate Doge Caucus, Senator Rand Paul. We work with him every year on his Festivus waste report that he releases right around Christmas. This year, he included a bunch of experiments on cats that we had exposed, $15 million worth of experiments on cats that we exposed, including COVID infection experiments on kittens that Fauci set into motion when he was still at the NIH, where they're just infecting kittens with COVID and killing them after a few days. And another project where they're doing constipation cats experiments at the DOD that have cost $10 million. So Rand Paul, Joni Ernst, the first family, obviously, as you mentioned, Congressman Matt Gaetz, and just hundreds of members of Congress. GOP conference chairwoman Lisa McClain has been leading a bill with us for a few years to cut funding for animal labs in China and Russia and other places. So we're very proud and grateful for all the support from these folks who have made cutting wasteful spending on animal testing a priority. And of course, you were at the ground level with us when we really launched in 2016, right, in conjunction with the first Trump administration, and we're able to score a lot of major wins. I think people don't really appreciate that. We made historic progress. You helped us get this stuff on Trump's radar, and we made historic progress during that first administration, doing things that no other administration in history had ever done. The Trump administration did more to end animal testing than any other administration in the history of this country, and that's not exaggeration. There's the receipts to show, from ending, the VA's heart attack tests on puppies, that not only did the VA halt under Trump, but he signed a law cutting the funding, shut down the government's largest cat lab, shut down the nicotine testing on monkeys at the FDA and sent them to a sanctuary in Florida, first time that ever happened. And of course, his EPA chief, Andrew Wheeler, put a historic plan in place to eliminate the poisoning of puppies with pesticides and other animal testing at the EPA. He put in a phase-out plan in 2019 that said by 2035, we're going to get rid of all of the animal testing at the EPA. Unfortunately, literally just a few weeks after Trump left office in 2021, the Biden administration, due to pressure from environmental groups, completely killed the plan to end animal testing at the EPA. So one of our priorities for the new administration is putting that plan back in place, and we're working with former administrator, Trump's EPA administrator, Andrew Wheeler, to make that happen.
Now, of course, you don't get any government funding. You're privately funded. It's a nonprofit. Tell my listeners how they can get in this fight. How can they help?
Thanks for that opportunity, Roger. Yeah, we are entirely funded by grassroots donors. We don't take any government money. We didn't take COVID bailout money like a lot of the big established animal rights groups took millions in COVID bailout money. We didn't take a penny of it. We walk the walk and we talk the talk, and we don't want the government's money. You can follow us, share our content at White Coat Waste on all the social media platforms. Follow me at Justin R. Goodman on Twitter, but at White Coat Waste on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you get your information, and visit our website, whitecoatwaste.org. And on there, you can join our mailing list, and then you can get involved, start contacting Congress. We have lots of petitions where it'll send a message from you directly to your members of Congress in the House and the Senate. Some other ones will send messages to the White House letting them know you don't want your taxpayer dollars being wasted to torture puppies and kittens in wasteful experiments.
Folks, if you love the animals as Jesus did, you need to get in this fight. So please go to those various websites and find the White Coast Waste Project on social media and join us in this important fight. Of all the things I've done in a 45-year career in American politics, there's nothing that I am prouder of than standing up for defenseless animals. I want to thank Justin Goodman, the Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Public Policy for the White Coast Waste Project, for joining us here today. And Justin, I want to invite you back to keep us posted on the progress, and when citizens need to step up, when they need to contact their legislators, when they need to contact their senators and their congressmen, when they need to take direct action. The door is always open here at the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. God bless you.
Thanks, Roger.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. Ken Kachigian served as a trusted speechwriter, confidant, and strategist to political legends and presidential giants, both Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon. Whether in the Oval Office, on Air Force One, at Camp David, or the Western White House, Kachigian was an eyewitness and insider to some of the 20th century's greatest historical moments. When I worked for Presidents Nixon and Reagan, very much his junior, Ken Kachigian is one of the men I looked up to, and it is a great honor for me to have him join us today on the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, great to be with you as always.
Well, let's kind of
hear from the left coast.
I'm delighted that you could join us today. As a man who has worked on presidential inaugural addresses, as well as some of the most important speeches by two American presidents, first I'd like to ask you your thoughts on President Trump's inaugural address.
You know, as you know, I worked on, I collaborated with President Reagan on his first inaugural address. That was a big moment for me, working with him on that historic speech delivered on January 20th, 1981, and a very historic address. And so my views on President Trump's address was exactly what he should have done. It was an authentic speech. It was. I probably would have changed a little bit of it. There was, I think, it was important. What was the most important about it was that he laid forth all the elements of his campaign that he promised, and that was the authenticity of his speech. That was the absolute most important thing. People expected him to strike an element of unity, to reach out to the opposition. I don't think that would have worked. That would have not been authentic. What was important was for him to lay down exactly what he did in his campaign. What I would have done just slightly differently is not probably put out the elements of the policies that sounded a little bit like a State of the Union. But you know what? That was Donald Trump. And I wouldn't change anything because he did what he wanted to do. And so you can't change what a person does. And so I think when he goes up there and does what is the real person, that comes off as authentic and real, and that's what's so different about him and his predecessor and some of his other predecessors. So to that extent, that was a home run on his part, Roger.
Well, as someone who's been around him for 45 years and someone who's experienced in national politics, he is truly unique. He is not handled, he is not managed, he is not scripted, he is not programmed. Right. He is just very much his own man. Perhaps it's because he didn't come from the world of politics. He didn't go through the chairs of being a congressman and a senator and a vice president before getting to the presidency. But I think what I like to say is he's not always eloquent, but he is always articulate, meaning you always know exactly where he stands. He leaves no doubt about that. He is combative because that is his nature. He is a warrior. But this sweeping victory, this historic victory, where he won every swing state and, the Democrats said it was impossible, carried the national popular vote, it's a testimony to his resilience, testimony to his toughness, to his stamina, to his persistence, and to his spirit. I have to ask you, how do you think he's doing? He's very obviously focused on getting a lot done in the first 100 days. How do you think he's doing so far?
Well, let me back up and say one thing. He had to let his adversaries know he couldn't be beaten down, and that was important. So to that extent, I applaud him very much so in that speech. He stood up and said, look, you can't beat me down. I stood above you and I won, and you can't sweep me away. So that was very, very important. So the first 100 days, he's gotten a great start. I really admire what he's doing. I was there at the first 100 days of the Reagan administration and sat in on the first cabinet meetings where President Reagan tried to get things done to make his cabinet cut back government. And he tried to do a lot of the same things that President Trump is doing. But he got pushback. And one of the reasons is that he didn't have the same strength from his staff. He didn't have the same crusading spirit from his staff. And what Trump has the benefit of is that he was there before, and he knew what he wanted to do, and his transition prepared for this. So what they're doing is brilliant, absolutely brilliant, having all those executive orders prepared and making all these moves and doing it with lightning speed that is throwing everybody off balance. That's what this is absolutely stunning. I appreciate what he's doing immensely. It's going to go down in the history books, Roger.
I give enormous credit to the first woman White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles. You and I both worked with her. You worked with her on the White House staff. I worked with her in the 1980 Reagan campaign. She's an enormously capable, buttoned-down, organized woman. I've never heard her raise her voice once, but when you do something she doesn't like, when you make a mistake, you get a one-line text message that says, do you really think that this was helpful? And you just want to climb under your desk, you know? She is a great compliment to the president because she understands him. She knows how to carry out his wishes in the most efficient and effective way. She eschews the spotlight. She's never, ungrudgingly given an interview. She's given very, very few interviews. She understands that the focus should be on the president and his agenda, not on his staff members. I think she's an enormously capable woman. There is no one who could have done this job as she's done it. And that's through a campaign in which she took a lot of slings and arrows from others who thought they had a better idea of how to elect Donald Trump. I think it's among his greatest appointments. Ken, what do you think of these cabinet appointments? A very narrow but important victory for Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. Hopefully that sets the stage for what is to come. But what's your thinking?
That was excellent. It's going to turn out to be an excellent appointment, Roger. Mainly because I think what the problem has been in our armed services and its Defense Department is we've had a horrible recruitment problem. When President Nixon turned our military into the all-volunteer services, spurred on by Marty Anderson is the one who convinced him to do that. But anyway, he turned it into an all-volunteer service. You've got to have an esprit de corps. You've got to have somebody at the top who encourages recruitment, and that just totally fell apart under the Biden administration. And with somebody like Hegseth at the top, who's been in the military, who knows how to run the show in that respect, and who the enlisted men and women who are going to join the military now know that there's going to be a real leader, somebody who knows how to lead the troops and to battle and to do the job of the defense, American defense, to win a war if we need to go into war. That's a really great appointment. And then over at state, I'm really admiring Marco Rubio. I really like that appointment, and I think he's already sending signals across the world that America has a story to tell. So so far so good. And at the Justice Department, Pam Bondi, the way she handled those hearings and put Adam that sickly worm into place, put him in his place. That was so wonderful. She's going to be great at the Justice Department.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Ken Kachigian. When we come back, we're going to talk about his incredible new book, In the Room, with Presidents Nixon and Reagan. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we are honored to be with Ken Kachigian, trusted speechwriter, confidant, but here's the most important, not just a scribe, but a shrewd strategist who worked for Presidents Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, in my opinion, elected the last great governor of California, George Deukmejian. And he is the author of a new book, Behind Closed Doors, Inside the Room with Reagan and Nixon. If you're a political junkie as I am, or you love history, you can get this book by going to nixonandreagan.com. That's nixonandreagan.com. Now, there was a terrific review of this book in the San Clemente Times last week. Ken Kachigian writing on X, formerly known as Twitter, saying it was a fair, balanced, and gave readers a special insight into the captivating stories in my book. Again, the book Behind the Closed Doors, Inside the Room with Nixon and Reagan. It's no wonder that the whiners at the Washington Post have boycotted a review of this book. It's because the rookie reporter out of Whittier College has written more concisely and crisply for the St. Clemente Times than anything that Ken has seen in the Washington Post for years. Ken, as someone whose books were bestsellers but who never got reviewed by the New York Times or the Washington Post, I guess I know how you feel. I guess those elitists at the Washington Post fear that reviewing your excellent book would offend their establishment elite sources who try even today to undermine and undercut Ronald Reagan's legacy as among our greatest presidents. My friend, let it fly.
That's the only conclusion I can draw, Roger. I mean, I'm just baffled by this. 2 months before the book's release, I wrote John Williams. He's the books editor at the Washington Post. I wrote him an email with my biography and a cover of the book, and I said, look, I wrote a really pleasant note, and I said, many of the reporters at the Post know me. I've been their sources for 16 years, and a generation I was a source for them. I helped them with their stories. Dan Balson, David Hoffman, and Lou Cannon, and Karen Temelty, and on, they all know me. And I said, would you please consider, doing a review of my book? It's the most important book about Reagan and Nixon written in the last 20 years, basically. And I never heard back from this guy. Then a month later, I followed up with him a nice note, pleasant note, and I said, I sent you a nice note. I'll send you a copy of my book, and would you please consider doing a review? And he didn't, no response, which is, insulting, because at least out of courtesy, you would get a response from this guy, John Williams. But, I think it's because they're pushing this book by Max Boot, who claims that not only that Reagan didn't win the Cold War, that Gorbachev won the Cold War, and also that Reagan is not a conservative but a pragmatist, and that Reagan's tax cuts didn't win over the economy, but that it was mainly because of Paul Volcker that brought the economy around in morning in America. I mean, it's all these crazy, not so revisionist views of Reagan that the Washington Post is pursuing, plus the fact that I think they're protecting all these sources that undercut Reagan during his administration that I've exposed in my book. So if you really want to put the screws to the Washington Post, you need to buy my book. You can get it at my website, ReaganandNixon.com, or go to Amazon, please, and help me out. And this is a great book on Reagan. It's a first-hand account, the only first-hand account that's out there now.
Time magazine called Ken Kachighian Reagan's word wizard. Newsweek labeled him as a lusty polemist with a gift for Reagan's gab. He is one of the smartest guys I know. The folks at the Washington Post have a lot to atone for because, as you and I both know, their entire narrative of Watergate is a fiction. Bob Woodward needs to admit that he was a U.S. Naval intelligence officer and he was briefing Al Haig. They need to admit that in the Moore Radford affair, the U.S. Pentagon was spying on Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger because they didn't want to end the war in Vietnam, because they didn't want the overture to China, because they didn't want the strategic arms limitation agreement that President Nixon achieved. They know there is no deep throat, or at a very minimum, deep throat is a composite of a number of sources. The Woodward-Bernstein narrative of Watergate, which is sadly even today the most accepted narrative, is a fraud. I prove it in my book, Nixon's Secrets. It's been proved in a great new book by Nick Bryant, who tells the truth about Watergate. The small, slim volume that you must have. Folks, get Ken Kachigian's book at nixonandreagan.com. If you love politics, if you love those presidents, if you love American history, this is the book for you. Ken, thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Oh my God, it's the coolest thing ever. Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? Well, check this out. It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. Seriously. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50. Code listen50. Terms and conditions apply.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back, folks. Last week, President Donald Trump issued pardons or commutations for over 1,500 individuals who were involved in the events of January 6th. In many cases, those who had been convicted of nonviolent crimes had already served far more for their crimes, such as trespassing, than would normally be the case. And all of those incarcerated were subjected to extraordinarily inhumane conditions in the D.C. jail, conditions that include a lack of potable water, a denial of medical attention for life-threatening health issues, living in backed-up sewage. And if you complained, well, you were beaten or your food was laced with cleaning chemicals or maggots. It's hard to believe that these conditions, violations of the Geneva Conventions, are allowed in America today. But one man who has been left behind despite his full pardon is Jeremy Brown. Jeremy Brown is a retired U.S. Army Special Forces Master Sergeant who took the oath in 1992 and served this country honorably for 20 years. He joined the Oath Keepers, an organization that commits itself to the U.S. Constitution, in the fall of 2020. And he was soon approached by members of the Tampa FBI's Joint Terrorist Task Force and the Department of Homeland Security before January 6, 2021, to become an informant. He quite legally recorded that meeting and turned the agents down. Then on January 6th, he went to D.C. for the Save the America rally at the Ellipse and to provide security at planned, legally permitted rallies at the Capitol as requested. His mission included providing security for a relative of one of the speakers at the permitted rally site. He never crossed any area closed signage. He never broke anything. He committed no violence. He was not in the group that entered the Capitol building. He saved a woman from being trampled after she was pushed to the ground by police as they forcefully shoved people backwards into a clear terrace area. Around March 2021, he published the attempted recruitment audio, knowing that there had been a plot of some kind against President Trump and the Oath Keepers. As Dr. Darren Beatty at Revolver.news has proven, at the end of September 21, he was arrested, and his residence was searched with an illegal search warrant signed by a D.C. magistrate for 2 misdemeanor charges using the out-of-jurisdiction pretext of terrorism. This is because a January 6 cooperating witness presented false hearsay to the FBI in January of 2021, meaning it was legally stale and uncorroborated, claiming that another Oath Keeper said Jeremy might have had explosives in his van when he drove from Virginia and Maryland. He didn't. The FBI warrant application deliberately bypassed the Florida magistrate. There were 2 guns found in the search of his home that came from his deceased brother. These guns were unregistered heirlooms that had short barrels and therefore would normally only be charged as a misdemeanor, if at all, under the IRS tax section of the U.S. Code. Jeremy never used those guns in any crime and never transported them across any state line. Indeed, he had no weapons with him in D.C. It was merely for possession of stored items, indeed, virtually antiques. He was convicted of felonies for the firearms he admittedly had. He was also convicted for 2 old fragmentation grenades and a CD, allegedly with classified something on it that neither he nor his girlfriend has ever before had, that were found by the ATF and the FBI searchers in her RV that was parked in the cul-de-sac outside his home. Can you say planted evidence? The 2 grenades had DNA, fingerprints, fibers, and hair that do not match Jeremy or his RV or his residence or his dogs, yet he was convicted. Now, the pardon against Jeremy Brown in Florida is 100% January 6th related, and that's required by the full presidential proclamation. Nonetheless, Jeremy was arrested and imprisoned based on January 6th allegations that led to this pretextual search warrant. Here's the bottom line. After his D.C. case was dismissed on January 21st, U.S. Marshals decided on January 22nd at the D.C. jail where Jeremy was moved for trial during release of the January 6ers, that Jeremy Brown does not qualify for a pardon or release because of the Florida case conviction. That case is on appeal in front of the 11th Circuit in Florida. His appeal derives from the Florida Middle District conviction in Tampa that arose from the illegal, out-of-jurisdiction, and illegally conducted search warrant for January 6th charges. Joining me now is Jeremy Brown's attorney, Carolyn Stewart, who is here to talk about this horrific travesty and miscarriage of justice. Carolyn, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. It's good to be here today. And, to clear up a lot of confusion, because, there are a lot of people who are very, very interested in this case, and they know the wrongfulness of him still being imprisoned. They have to understand this is a federal charge in Florida that was January 6th related. The DOJ wanted to accuse him of being a terrorist. We're going to get an out-of-jurisdiction warrant, but it was brought in federal court. So it falls under the president's pardon authority, and because it's January 6th related. But there's a disconnect in the DOJ where the right hand and left hand aren't talking. The DOJ in D.C. was like, clearly, his case is dismissed. And what they're doing on the January 6th, what has to happen under pardon, is because he was convicted and then he was not fully convicted because his case is on appeal. You could read the pardon language. If you're not fully convicted, the case is the charges should be vacated and dismissed. That's what they're doing up in the D.C. circuit, but the 11th circuit's not doing it. well, I don't expect the judges to sua sponte on their own look at this. I mean, they should if they've read the case. It's due for oral argument in March. But it's a matter of the Florida U.S. attorney. So this is, again, it's a continued persecution, trying to keep him in prison. Everybody else is out, even other oath keepers were commuted, but the majority are pardoned. And yet he's sitting there, and we can't get him out because the U.S. Marshals say, we're just responding to a detention, and we have to take him back. So they don't even call attorneys when they're moving people around. They don't call families. They might give the person a phone call. The jail won't talk, and then we can get into the conditions at the jail where he's currently at. If anybody can imagine, the D.C. Gulag now is rated as having better conditions than this one in Grayson, Oklahoma. So, Governor Beshear, don't be too proud of yourself. We have a representative in the state who's trying to help, but this is absolutely horrendous, Roger.
It is really shocking. I want to go through this to be absolutely clear. Jeremy Brown never assaulted anybody, did he?
No, not at all.
Jeremy Brown never entered the U.S. Capitol, did he?
Nope, not at all.
Jeremy Brown was not involved in any conspiracy to enter the Capitol, was he?
Oh, my goodness, no. And there's nothing even on text or chats or all the BS that the prosecution makes up. As you know, they go back and say, oh, look at these texts from 6 months ago. The guy said something negative about the government. He must be a traitor. I mean, it's ridiculous. But, go ahead.
Yeah, it is really extraordinary. They're defying a presidential pardon. They're doing it because they can. It was chilling the other morning when I got a text from you. They removed him at 5:15 a.m. in the morning to take him out of the D.C. Gulag, to take him to Kentucky. I guess he may or may not be on his way to another horrific federal prison in Oklahoma. This case cries out for justice. And folks, you can help. We need your help. You can go to Give, Send, Go. I want to say that, first of all, Caroline Stewart is working pro bono. She takes not a penny for her representation of Jeremy Brown and her fight. But Jeremy Brown and his mother and his girlfriend, Tylene Aldridge, they do need your support. And you can go to GiveSendGo.com, GiveSendGo. His page is there. It's called Defend All Americans' Constitutional Right. Jeremy Brown swore an oath to Almighty God that he would protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. He has done that. He has committed no crime here. He's being punished because he refused to be a snitch. And he has the recording which he released. He's refused to be a snitch. So, folks, please go to GiveSendGo.com and support this valiant patriot who has done nothing whatsoever wrong. We'll be right back. I'm Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show, and we're talking to criminal defense lawyer, in this case, Carolyn Stewart.
This is The Roger Stone Show. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. We are talking to Carolyn Stewart, who is the attorney representing Master Sergeant Green Beret Jeremy Brown, who, despite his full and unconditional presidential pardon, continues to be held in the most horrific incarceration by the Bureau of Prisons and U.S. Marshals in direct defiance of the order given for a full pardon by President Donald Trump. Caroline, I'm kind of interested in you. You told me the other day that you didn't decide to go to law school until you were 60 years old, that you're handling this case pro bono, that you're representing others with January 6 issues. Tell us a little bit about you, if you would.
Okay, thanks. Well, you gave away state secrets because I've never gone past 39 years old, but we'll let that one. We'll let that slide. Roger.
I apologize. I got that wrong.
No, yeah, you had bad information. So, yeah, I was working. I myself was attacked by the deep state as an intel analyst for putting out, and that was in the time of Clapper Brennan. But I fought it. I won. I mean, they tried to attack me, and. I stayed there, but I woke up one morning and I'm like, wait, I should go to law school. And so whatever occurred overnight, from March of 2017 until, I ran and took the LSAT and got accepted at Ave Maria School of Law, along with a couple of others. And I went there. I thoroughly enjoyed it. A wonderful place in Naples. Accolades to them. And I took the bar exam, passed it. We were delayed because of COVID. We never had a graduation. We did some online things, but, this was all the COVID. Nobody, so all the horrible things with that. But within, I'm starting my law business. I'm doing some EEO cases, some labor law, helping some people with local things. My whole intent was always to just do low bono and to help vets and their families. But former military referred a January 6er to me in August of 2021, whose attorney had him plead guilty to the infamous 1512, which the Supreme Court overturned as having been misapplied in the January 6 cases. But they sent him to me, and, here I am, Roger, I'm telling this guy, I've never done a criminal case. I'll research it, I'll help you. But, the other attorney had taken all of his life savings to force him into this plea deal. So, that kind of started it, and then people started coming. So I'm kind of like the German Gasthaus for people who, have been out in, rural or areas of Germany where, everybody just knows where the Gasthouses are. And that's me. I don't even have a website, so I don't want anybody to try to look for it. I mean, I just get recommendations, and that's the kind of law I'm doing. I'm trying to bring law to people who generally hate lawyers or don't want to have anything to do with lawyers, but they should have access to the courts and to the proper things. And then, I feel very bad, but I've had to turn away some requests from January 6 clients, and those are generally the people who have retained somebody, and after about a year of their case have realized they weren't getting any help, but it was kind of too late for me to come in. The amount of work in these cases for attorneys who are really doing their job and are defending their clients is huge because it's all video. I mean, even just in Jeremy Brown's case, to go in and look at the video, but other cases, and to let you know, I think my religious background, my faith in God has helped me because you've done everything. You've planned. You've put the 100 hours in before going into the courtroom. You're pretty sure you're going to lose, but you put the evidence out there, and you get smacked down. But your client, who you care about their family, you know them at this point, has been convicted, and that's the thing that I think even now Vice President Vance gets, that there's been no due process, there's been no justice, there's been no partial. So it's also been an awakening for me that if I hadn't had my faith, I don't know that I could pray and just get back up every day. There have been attorneys who've tried and then they just say, I can't do this anymore. And there aren't enough attorneys who cared about justice. They just think everybody's guilty because they were there. This is what a lot of these defendants have been faced with across the board.
Well, as someone who's had 5 miracles in his own life, someone who is redeemed in the blood of the cross, somebody who returned to his faith and completely changed their life. By the way, my wife and I are thinking about moving to Ave Maria as Catholics. It's a wonderful community. God bless you for taking this fight on. It is tough to get knocked down and just keep getting back up. But as I said earlier in the program, this is why I admire the late President Richard Nixon because of his resilience. I think it was Vince Lombardi who says it's not how many times you get knocked down, but it's how many times you get up. I'm not going to quit in this fight for justice for Jeremy Brown. I was aware of his case from the very beginning, spoke out before him on his behalf much earlier. I'm going to keep speaking out about it. I have reason to believe that the president and those at the Justice Department are now fully aware of what's going on, and I am praying that they will step into this situation and help you achieve the justice that he so richly deserves. Here's a man who has served his country with distinction, and he did nothing whatsoever wrong. A ranger, a Green Beret, a firefighter, a citizen, a small business owner, a coach, a congressional candidate, and now a political prisoner. Again, I stress, he assaulted no one. He damaged no government property. He didn't trespass. He didn't harm anyone. There is no crime here other than the crime of refusing to be a snitch for the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, and therefore he's being made an example of. It's egregious, it's sinful, it's evil, but we will not give up. We will not give up until we achieve justice for Jeremy Brown and we sustain him. Folks, once again, you can help Jeremy Brown, his mom, his family, by going to GiveSendGo.com. His page is called Defend All Americans' Constitutional Rights. This is one of the most outrageous, abusive cases of political persecution that I've seen. It's up there with the case against me. And we can't leave anyone behind on the field. This is an innocent man who's being literally tortured over politics. This is raw politics. I hope not only will the president intervene with the 11th Circuit as appropriate by law, and demonstrate that Jeremy Brown received a full and unconditional pardon. And the idea that his conviction is related to anything other than January 6th is nonsensical. This search of his home, where they found very clearly planted evidence, this is something that no American should stand for. So, Carolyn, God bless you in this fight. God bless your client. We stand with you, and we won't stop fighting until Jeremy Brown is free. God bless you.
All right, thank God bless you. All right, thank you.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by GMC. GMC certified service technicians are factory trained to fit your vehicle with the tires specifically developed for it. And with our tire price match guarantee, you get the best fit for the best deal. Let us do the work. Available on select eligible tire brands at participating dealers only. Offer ends 12/31/2025. Terms apply. See dealer for complete details. Visit gmc.com/service to learn more.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone on 77 WABC Radio, the most powerful, influential, and entertaining AM radio station in America. We are the crown jewel of talk radio. You're in the right place, and particularly if you love politics, because we eat, sleep, and breathe politics, although we also talk about news, history, the politics, of course, and style. Two small political notes before we go to our revered guest, my colleague Frank Morano, who has hosted After Midnight here on 77 WABC, announcing his candidacy for the New York City Council. I admire people who get in the arena. Frank is jumping in the arena, and, well, I'm writing a check to his campaign today. I'm proud of him. He's a great friend, and he's going to be a great New York City Council member. And then I have to note an interesting new poll by Emerson College right across the river there in New Jersey shows, well, guess what? President Ronald Reagan more popular than the sitting Governor Phil Murphy. Garden State voters have a 48% favorable view of President Trump and only a 44% vote, a popular view of Governor Murphy. I think this is thanks to the very hard work of Mike Crispy and the America First Republicans. Now it is my privilege to bring on a man who is literally an American show business legend. Pat Boone is an American singer, actor, and author who may be one of the most popular entertainers of all time. He started in the 1950s and 60s, one of the original teen idols, revered by the Bobby Soxers, and he has gone on to become one of the most influential actors and entertainers of all time. We're going to play a little bite of one of his first songs to bring him into the Roger Stone Show. Here is Love Letters in the Sand.
Over love letters in the sand.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pat Boone joins us now on the Roger Stone Show.
You there?
Pat, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so honored to have you. You're a legend. In my home, there was Sinatra, there was Bing Crosby, there was Elvis Presley, and there was Pat Boone. That's who my mother loved, not necessarily in that order. So it's an extraordinary honor for me to have you here on the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC.
Well, thank you, Roger. Being in that company of my own role models and realize that by the grace of God, I've outlived all of them. And I was just a college kid who started to have hit records back in the 50s. And now I'm still doing a weekly show on Sirius XM, 50s Gold, and not just playing music of the 50s, but in many cases my own hits of the 50s. And yet here I am in my 91st year and still recording. And the other guys, the Sinatra and Crosby and Elvis, are all, I hope, singing in heaven.
Well, one of the things I admire most about you, Pat, and I said this the other day, I met you when I was 12 years old at a Goldwater rally in Southern California, is that you've never been shy about your deep faith in Christ. You've never been shy about your conservative and traditional values. I know in show business that there are many who agree with you and I, but they hide their light beneath a bushel, as they say. They think it's bad for their career to say where they stand. You've never been like that. You've always stood for certain important principles in your life. You were a close friend of one of our greatest presidents, Ronald Reagan. In fact, very recently, you were in the 2024 biographical film Reagan, where you played Reverend George Otis, who was a real-life preacher who in 1970 prophesied that Ronald Reagan would become president if he continued to walk uprightly before God. This is one of the most significant moments in the film, highlighting Reagan's faith. And then later in the film, this is almost like Larry Parks playing Al Jolson, an actor named Chris Massagolia, I guess it is, plays you in the movie. It must have been something to see somebody playing yourself. What was that like?
Well, it was bizarre, I would say that, because here I am in a scene and an event that really happened, but of course by recreating it, I could not portray Pat Boone. I'm too old to portray Pat Boone from then, and so this young guy did a good job of being me, and then another actress playing my wife Shirley. But the event actually did happen. It was a true word of prophecy that was fulfilled, came true, and that Reagan, of course, was the man who stayed true to his own principles right straight through the presidency and into human history. I mean, I think he belongs on Mount Rushmore, really. He's one of the great, ideals of the presidency, one who did stick so completely to his principles and didn't let anything, and he stood there at that Berlin Wall against the advice of his own counselors and say what he had written into his own speech, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, he said. And that's sort of an imitation of the way he sounded doing it. But Gorbachev did tear down the wall and became an avid follower and friend of Reagan, who implored him on that day. So, I mean, Reagan was exceptional in every way, and of course his love story with Nancy, that's an important part of the film. But yeah, for me, I just think it's a God thing in my life that I was given the privilege of recreating that scene, and though I didn't play Pat Boone in it, I played George Otis. Still, it was Pat Boone who was there and could report what actually had happened. So I've had a lot of those moments in my life, and I'm sure you have too, where it can't be a coincidence. It has to have been somehow arranged by a higher power. And that's why in my career, which you're kindly represented there, I didn't have to give in to my principle, because I just continued to speak and then kept on being able to do hit songs and hit movies, which kept me in the limelight, even though many of the powers that were in the entertainment industry, I was not on their list ever for either celebrity events. I wasn't invited to the premieres. I wasn't invited to the big parties, which was fine with me because I didn't want to go to them anyway. But my career kept going in spite of the fact that I had been written off and was canceled out of movie parts. I would have been good to have played, but they didn't like my politics. But still, other opportunities kept coming.
Pat Boone has sold over 45 million records during his career and has had more than 30 top 40 hits. If you have any doubt about his prodigious career, and he continues to work. You have both a new book and a new album out. I want to talk about both of them and tell folks where they can get them. You have a new book entitled If. You can get it by going to goldlabelartists.com, goldlabelartists.com. Pat, tell us about this book.
Well, thank you for mentioning it, Roger. It came to me, as I say, it's not an accident. It just suddenly was very prominently in my mind, and I knew it was, I interpreted it, and I think it was right, that it was God saying, write a book called If, that one word. And I checked into the word, and I checked it through in references in the Bible. It is the most used word in the Bible, except for and to, and it's if. And it is part of every promise of God in the Bible. If you want it. So when God gives us and offers us everything that he can be and give to us, It's if we want to follow him, if we want to be considered a child of God. Because what God has always wanted, and this is the point I make in the book, the reason he created the human race is he wanted a family of kids that looked like him, because even Adam and Eve were created in his image, and he wanted kids that would want to please their daddy, and that want to be blessed by an all-powerful God, but also want to make him happy and be close to him. And as all daddies want of their kids, would enjoy the company, the continuing company of their father. Well, that's who God wants to be with the human race. But there are too many people who want the blessings and want the freedoms and everything God can provide, but they're not interested in personal, close relationship with the one who wants to be our Father. So that's the point I make in the book, and I think, based on the response of people that let me know that they read it, they really get that message, and it's something that they hadn't ever considered, that the God of heaven and earth wants to be literally our daddy.
It is an amazing book. I ordered it online. I've just started to thumb through it. I haven't gotten through all of it yet, but just your continued energy and your appetite for work is inspiring. I told you last week I was 72. You called me junior. You said I'm just a kid. I said I was just warming up, and made me feel pretty darn good, I must say. When we come back, I want to talk about your influences. You have a relatively new album, Country Jubilee. Has 25 tracks in which you very carefully curate some of the greatest country classics in history. You cover some of the greatest stars in country and Western music. I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about your co-stars, because you have worked with all of the greats. I want to hear who Pat Boone likes, because I love you, and I think you're an icon. The honor of having you on the show is really, it's almost overwhelming for me.
Come on.
No, I have always looked up to you. Look, I saw you speak when I was 12 years old. You were the most famous person I'd ever met at that point. I went on to work for Ronald Reagan in 3 presidential campaigns. I'm proud of it, but to me, you are very, very special, and we appreciate your being with us today. When we come back, folks, we're going to talk about the Country Jubilee album that Pat has cut, and then I want to get his opinion on our 45th and 47th president. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show here on 77 WABC, and we're talking to show business legend and icon Pat Boone. Folks, don't go away. We'll be right back.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See RemixYogurt.com.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
And we're back. I'm Roger Stone. If you're just tuning in, we're talking to showbiz legend, literally an icon, Pat Boone, who is still going strong as a singer, entertainer, advocate, Christian, and it is a great honor to have him on the show today. Pat, you have an album, Country Jubilee, in which you've recorded covers, I believe, 25 tracks of some of the most influential music in the country western genre. You can get this album, by the way, at goldlabelartists.com. That's goldlabelartists.com, which is a label that Pat started to produce this classic music. Tell us about the album, Pat.
Well, I sure will. And it is an unusual, I don't think there has been an album like it because country music performers don't record each other's songs. That's just, in pop music and other kinds of music, it's a compliment when one artist will do somebody else's song his way. But in country music, a George Jones song stays a George Jones song. An Eddie Arnold song stays an Eddie Arnold song, except for Hank Williams. He was the exception in which most country performers have recorded at least one or two Hank Williams songs. But in my case, though I wasn't considered a country artist, and I was really kind of chagrined about it because I grew up in Nashville, and Dinah Shore and I think, are the only artists of celebrity or note who actually grew up in Nashville and didn't come there later in their careers. But I had been recording my favorite country songs in my albums for the almost 70 years of my recording. So we put together an album of my versions of 26 million selling songs, and by one artist, me, and it hasn't ever happened before, and it may never happen again, except I'm already putting together an album of 25 more great country classics that I also have recorded in my albums, and I'm really proud of it because they're very good versions of even songs like Tennessee Waltz. I grew up in Tennessee. Patti Page had a million-seller hit with it, but now I've done my own version, and I've done my own version of George Jones songs and Eddie Arnold songs like Make the World Go Away, and all of these. If you're a country fan, then you're going to love this album because of all the big all-time million-selling country hits all in one album. So it's a first and maybe a one only, and I'm happy to promote it because I love the songs. I think I've sung them well, and I am a country guy.
Well, and the best part is I haven't heard this yet, but you have a duet with Crystal Gayle on the #1 Billboard hit, You and I, which has to really be amazing. Again, folks, you can get this album right now by going to goldlabelartists.com, goldlabelartists.com. I think it's something you will really enjoy. It's just a testimony to the continued hard work of Pat Boone, who is still singing, still entertaining, and still standing up for America. Pat, I have to ask you your views on the 45th and 47th president. When I saw Joe Biden giving out those medals of freedom to Americans who have really done exceptional things for this country, I think you should be nominated for a Medal of Freedom.
Well, I was a long, long time ago considered, like Elvis was, one of the 10 outstanding young men, but that was over 50 years ago. And it's not for me to opine whether or not I should be given any other kind of honor. But, of course, I'd be grateful for it if it were to happen. But I have known and been friendly with all the presidents since Harry Truman. And the only two that I didn't actually have any personal relationship or kinship or friendship with was Obama and Clinton. No, I did with Bill Clinton. I met him when he was governor of Arkansas. But it was JFK and Obama, the ones that I have not met. But even Lyndon Johnson and Reagan and all the others, the Bushes, both Bushes. But I've known them all. I would take the Easter Seal poster child because I was hosting the Easter Seal telethon for 18 years. And with the Easter Seals people raised some $600 million to help kids with all kinds of disabilities. And I would take the Easter Seal poster child to the Oval Office, and whoever was president would welcome them, and we would take pictures. And it was making, actually we were honoring the child herself or himself, and that was just one of the activities that I've done like that for so many years, jumping at the opportunity to in some way make use of this career, which gave me more either credit or blessings than I deserved. And I always wanted to use that platform for whatever good it could be for others. And God's enabled me to make that happen. You said you were going to ask me about performers that I had been with, and which ones I might would want to talk about. And the one thought popped in my head right then was Queen Elizabeth. I sang for her twice, and in 2 command performances. But the second one was the most embarrassing moment of my life. And if you want to know, I'll tell you what it was. It won't take but a minute.
Please.
Should I tell?
Sure.
Well, the first time I was still in college. I was doing rock and roll songs, Ain't That a Shame, Tutti Frutti, and having country rock and roll hits, and was a teen idol. So here I was singing for the Queen of England, and meeting her afterwards, the whole royal family, and all I had to do then was rent a tux and sing my songs. And then as she goes through after the program in the Palladium Theatre in London, just bow my head, say, Your Majesty, and if she extended her hand, I would take it. Otherwise, you don't reach out to shake hands with the Queen. You wait to see if she wants to take your hand, and you answer to whatever she says to you. Well, so I passed with flying colors, even when I was in college. But later, 4 or 5 years later, I went back for another command performance, and I was feeling a little blasé, I must say, which can be very embarrassing if it goes wrong. I thought, oh, well, anybody can do this. I'll just bow my head when she stands in front of me, Your Majesty, and if she says anything, I'll take her hand and just, answer whatever she says. And on one side of me was Peter Sellers, and the 2 or 3 important male actors, and then Claudia Cardinal on the other side of me. Peter Finch was one of the others, and they were all real nervous. I thought, hey, what's the big deal? All I have to do is just respond to whatever she says. So, and I said, she's not going to remember ever meeting me anyway. And so here she comes past the others, and I begin to feel butterflies. And now she stands in front of me, even with her crown and beautiful. She's shorter than I am. And sure enough, as she stands in front of me, she extends her hand to me as I say, Your Majesty. And she says, we met before. I said, we did? I mean, you remember that? And but it was already out of my mouth. I was pictured in one of the in London papers later, the Queen just having talked to me, and now with Claudia Cardinal, who they were both laughing at something, and I know what they were laughing about. I was standing there with a shocked look on my face. I just said to the Queen of England, when she said, we met before, I said, we did? Oh, when was that, Queenie? And that just happens when you get full of yourself, so I'm trying to make sure that I don't embarrass myself by thinking, well, hey, I know how to handle this. I didn't handle that.
All right, Pat, we got about 3 minutes here. I'm really going to prevail on you. You've got a new song called Grits. You sang it for me last week. It was great. Give us a couple bars for my audience, would you?
Well, I'll give it to you just as it came to me in a dream. I was dreaming that I was being ignored again as not being considered a country artist, but now I have a million-selling hit in my dream, and I heard myself sing this in the dream. Grits, grits, bestest food there is, country caviar, Tennessee foie gras, hey, grits and grits, bestest food there is, keep your fancy food, give me my grits. And I came out of the dream. I remembered all those words. I have to give God credit for the lyric of country caviar, Tennessee foie gras, 2 words that are French in origin, but a rhyme in the description of grits, that famous Southern food, and so that was one of the songs that is in my album, And I'm now recording other songs and have recorded one that's about to be released called One. And I use the word one 4 ways. One, I am one, like no other on this planet, I am one. In my oneness there is courage, there is purpose, there is honor. Like no other on this planet, I am one. But then another one, we are one. When good people come together, we are one. Unity, and then one nation under God. And finally, God himself, God is one. The Hebrew scripture, behold, O Israel, our God is one. And,
all right, we have to, unfortunately, Pat, we have to leave it there. I apologize. Superstar, icon, patriot, Christian, and inspiration for a young whippersnapper like me. Thank you, Pat Boone, so much for joining us. God bless you.
Thank you, Roger. Anytime, and God bless you.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio, the most powerful, influential, and entertaining AM radio station in America today. If you're not listening to us at 770 on the AM dial in the New York, New Jersey, Eastern Pennsylvania area, where I grew up, you can always listen to us at WABCRadio.com, where we are live streaming in 163 nations worldwide. There's never an excuse to miss a minute of the great programming here at 77 WABC. Download the app to your phone right now so you can hear it anytime. It is such a great privilege to be on the most influential AM radio station in America today. Joining me now is a great American patriot. Tim Burchett is a congressman from East Tennessee. He is an unabashed conservative and a Republican, a strong friend and supporter of President Donald Trump. I believe he is just seen at Doral, Florida. He is a guy who tells it like it is. He is a man who's not afraid to fight for the taxpayers, not to call out the politically incorrect as the fraud that they are. And it is a great privilege to have him with us. Tennessee's 2nd Congressional District Congressman, Tim Burchett. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, sir. It is always an honor to be on with you. When I was running for Congress, it was beyond my wildest dreams that I would ever even have a conversation with someone of your status. So I'm completely honored, and I thank you for that nice introduction.
Well, I'm proud to have just not mangled your name in the introduction like I did last time.
You're all right, brother. I don't care what you call me as long as you call me something.
Well, I'm very honored to have you. It's an exciting time to be an American. You were on CNN the other day. This just made me chuckle. We're going to play it because folks got to hear it.
I was at the White House covering the first Trump administration when they had rioting outside of the White House. I mean, that was covered on CNN. What you're saying, this is not Fox, Congressman. You can't just spin a tail and pull the wool over people's eyes. This is CNN. This is the news. We are asking you to come on and tell the truth.
And that's why more people are watching the Cartoon Network SpongeBob reruns right now, Jim. Look, I left the White House during a riot. My life was threatened. My life has been threatened within the last few weeks, yet there's no coverage of that. And you all continue this narrative of attacking Trump. You just can't stand the fact that he won and that America spoke.
Congressman,
and
no,
and that your
that's not
view
the
is
case.
very diminished.
That's not the case at all.
And your view is very diminished.
You know, I don't get my news from CNN for the same reason I don't drink out of the toilet. That was, of course, Jim Acosta and my friend Tim Burchett telling him off like I've wanted to do 100 times. Of course, I'm banned for life on CNN. Not that I would go on if they asked, but that must have felt really, really good because they are nothing but the purveyors of propaganda. It's not a news outlet. It's not a journalistic enterprise. Literally, virtually nothing they report is either true or accurate, and they just can't hide their hatred for Donald Trump, their hatred for America, their hatred for the America First agenda. God, that must have felt good to tell them off.
Yes, sir. Well, I've done it before, but one time I was on there and I invited them to my 15-minute Christmas party, and I said, well, I would love to have y'all there because I know I'm not going to spend eternity with any of you all. And apparently that got me banned for about 30 days. So I was back on, so I took another shot. And as I like to say, a blind hog gets an acorn every now and then.
I am a big supporter of Speaker Johnson. No, I don't agree with everything he does, but I understand how hard his job is. Because he's got a diverse caucus. We got some Republicans like you who are fearless, who will always stand up for the taxpayers and the Constitution. You got some other Republicans who maybe they just want to go along to get along and not rock the boat quite so much. The Speaker's got a very, very tough job because he's got to get a majority of his caucus in order to achieve anything. I like him a lot. Again, I don't agree with everything he's done, but I recognize how difficult his job is. Tell us about your colleague from Louisiana.
Well, I found him to be a very genuine person. I do a lot of praying, and I remembered the week after we dismissed our former speaker, I was home back here in Tennessee, and I was out on our little screened-in porch where me and my wife and I have our coffee in the morning, and it's kind of cool. Wild turkeys will come by sometime, and deer out there. We can see our horses and our donkeys and everything out there. And I remember telling Kelly, I said, baby, I said, if we could just get a shot at Mike Johnson being speaker, I think we'd be in pretty good shape. And I told her I'd been praying about it. And she said, what's the shot of him doing that? And I said, honey, he doesn't have any shot. And then lo and behold, there I was standing in the back of the room after we did it. I was standing there next to Matt Gaetz, and I said, brother, I think we just made history. And he laughed and said, I think we did. But I find him to be a very genuine person. I think the only tougher job probably in America is being a single mom, because he's got a tough gig. You know, you got these guys in New York up there where you're from. I mean, some of those areas, Biden or Kamala Harris won with 12 or 13 points, and they won, and they're Republicans, and it's a tough balancing act, and I don't envy him. I wouldn't want that position at all, but I think he's weathered the storm pretty good so far, and he's going to have a tough gig because everybody is up there thinking, I could be the next speaker, and they're looking at that avenue of how he'll fall. And that makes it even extra tough on him. That's why I always tell people to pray for him. And when I go by him, I never want anything. I just lean over and whisper in his ear, hey, brother, I prayed for you today. And he looks at me and nods because he is a tough guy. And, the left knocks him because he's so square. But, I think we've had enough of shady speakers in this country. And I think we need to get back to some people that actually fear God and fear the voters a little bit, and maybe are trying to be honest with them, because you're right. It is an incredibly tough job. And do I agree with everything? No. I want to cut spending. I want to cut. I want to, get out of Ukraine yesterday. I want to build the wall yesterday. I'm sick of all the nonsense, and I'm sick of pandering to any of these groups. It's just time to cut them off. These foreign countries, we're sending money to the Taliban. I have a bill to stop that. We're sending them like $40 million a week, and President Trump's on it, and he's helping us. You know, he put a ban in today or I'm not sure when it was, a presidential order to stop funding all these groups until they can get a grip on who the heck we're funding and where that money's going to. So and Speaker's right in there with him, and he's and I'll tell you one other thing. You know, I'm the 435th most powerful member of Congress. That's what I tell folks. But I'll text him, and 10 minutes later he'll call me back, and that I find that to be and he just sits there and just takes care of the conference, and that's what he does. So I couldn't be a bigger fan of his.
Yeah, I completely agree. First of all, folks can find this corny if they want. I don't really care. I think he was anointed by God for this job. He's a man who's not afraid to talk about his faith, talks openly about his faith. And I've had the same experience, and I'm not a member of the caucus, but on those few occasions where I've had to reach out to him about something that I thought was important, he always gets back to you. And I got to be pretty far down the list because I'm not a high-powered member of the Congress or the Senate or the White House staff, but he's a thoughtful guy. He's got a tough job. When I say the rosary at night, I include him. I really do. I can't say that about Mitch McConnell, but, well, that's the way it is.
Well, and can I say something? I always remember my daddy. My daddy was an old World War II veteran, fought in the Pacific in the Marine Corps. And my mama flew an airplane during the Second World War. She'd lost her brother fighting the Nazis. And I can remember them talking about, when I was a little boy, talking about how close we were to losing our country right before Nixon took office, and when all the riots and craziness were going on in this country. My dad was a dean at the University of Tennessee, and they stopped a lot of that nonsense over there. But it just seemed that the country was just getting rolled. And, you know, we had a strong leader in Nixon, and he didn't have the support of a lot of people. And you know, and now we're at that. I felt like I was speaking to a men's group last night, and I said, I don't know if everybody realizes just how close we were to losing our country and where we are right now, and how God is once again, you know, if Trump had caught that bullet in the head, I don't believe we would be in a horrible situation right now. And if he had in his executive orders and everything, he's followed through on what he said he was going to do. And that, you know, I really honestly felt like we could have lost our country because we could not have stood 4 more years of these openly Marxist members of Congress. And, you know, as I've had this conversation, I was having this conversation with Marjorie Taylor Greene last week. I said, you know, I fear more right now. I'm fearing the people in our own party not backing up this speaker and the president, because they're all yelling Doge. You know, they got Doge tattooed on their foreheads. But excuse my language, where the hell were they the last 4 years? We rolled over too many times for Biden and this regime, and we played footsie with them, and it could have honestly, I felt like, cost us our country. People think I'm an extremist, but I don't care. You're never an extremist when you're defending your country, and I just, yeah, I was honestly, I lay awake at night thinking this could be it. This could be it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we came incredibly close. Watching the successful confirmation of Pete Hegseth, who I think is going to be a great Secretary of Defense, going to get our military back onto a war footing in order to keep the peace. This is the peace through strength philosophy of Dwight Eisenhower and Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, not the neocon philosophy of going around the world looking for wars to get into where our inherent national interest is not at all clear. But that vote was very close. I have a piece out today very critical of Lisa Murkowski. She didn't get elected to the Senate. She was appointed to the Senate by her daddy. He was a senator. He got elected governor, and then he appoints his daughter to his vacant Senate seat. And then through something called ranked choice voting, that's where the candidate who doesn't get the majority of the votes becomes U.S. Senator. There's only 2 states, I think, where we do that. The other one is Maine. That's where Susan Collins is. Both Republicans, quote unquote. Now, she's a nice lady. I don't know Susan Murkowski. I've always found Susan Collins to be pleasant. We just don't agree. But it is some of these folks that call themselves Republicans need to go back and look what the party stands for and what they're supposed to be standing for. That victory is important, but it was also close. When we come back, first of all, I want to salute your colleague Matt Gaetz. His new show over at OAN is really taken off. I've had the privilege to be on with him a couple times. I think his greatest service to this country is still ahead of him, and I've been honored to be with him. But I want to talk to you about some of these other nominees the president's put forward. I want to hear whether you saw the president down there in Doral or when the last time you saw him. We're going to be right back with Congressman Tim Burchett from Tennessee's 2nd Congressional District, a fighter for the taxpayers, a non-politician. He was the mayor of Knox County, but he tells it like it is, and that means he's not a politician. It means he's a political leader. And, folks, there's a big difference. So don't touch that dial. We'll be back with this outstanding patriot in just a few minutes, so don't go away.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
And we're back. We're talking to Congressman Tim Burchett. Just to fill you in a little bit about the congressman, he served as the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, for 8 years. And thanks to his strong stewardship and good economic growth and his protection of tax dollars, his administration was able to build new schools, launch infrastructure projects, and pay down their debt, all without raising taxes. Take that, Eric Adams. Prior to his tenure as Knox County mayor, he started a successful small business before serving 16 years in state legislature, 4 years in state house, followed by 12 years in the state senate. Congressman Burchett currently serves on the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, Foreign Affairs, Transportation, and Infrastructure. It is a great honor for us to have him with us today. Congressman, how's President Trump doing as he launches the first 100 days of his new administration?
Well, I think he's stronger than ever. He doesn't sleep. He loves this country. You know, I spoke to a Christian men's group last night, and some of these guys are prudes, but it's Tennessee. It was kind of a sportsman's Christian group. They were talking hunting and Jesus all in the same breath, so it was a pretty good crowd. So, I told them, I said, look, I don't want somebody to teach in the White House teaching my daughter's Sunday school class. I said, I pray for his soul and I said, I think there's time for that. I said, I also, stated that I've always mentioned Soleimani. He was a terrorist and he was an awful SOB, and President Trump sent him to hell, and he did it with a cruise missile, and he didn't check with Pelosi. He didn't check with the UN, thank goodness, or NATO or Congress. He just did it, and it ticked everybody off. But you know what? You know how they identified that guy? By his ring finger, because that's all that was left of that dirty SOB, because he had this ugly ring on his pointing finger, on his index finger. And, and I told him, I said, that's why you better not doubt what he says. I said, and I think he's more tuned in, and he understands the system. You know as well as I do that some people ambushed him and some people were loyal to him, but it's just so big, even he couldn't get his hands around the whole government. And I think this go around, though, he's going to take a bigger chunk of it, and I think he realizes his place in history. He realizes he has 4 years, maybe just 2 years. we can't get some good candidates in some of these races, I worry about it. Worry about Republicans sniping other Republicans. Because if we would have had in some of these races, some of the MAGA Republicans that ran were not supported in the primary by our structure in Washington and some of the former leadership, as it turns out. And I feel like some of those people would have won over some of these milquetoast ones they ran and that lost and put our majority so close. And I think he realizes all that. And he's fired up and he's focused. And I was pleased, too, that his inaugural speech, I think, went about 24 minutes. The over-under, nobody, Las Vegas lost a fortune on that one because that was, everybody thought he'd go 2 hours. But I think it's because, he's just ready to get back to business. I mean, he was doing a press conference while he was signing executive orders. That's just unheard of. I thought that was, at first I thought, well, that's not reality. He's not really doing that. But he really was. He had the press in the Oval Office, and he was just answering questions. And people were just throwing stuff out. And before they got to the end, they asked all their dadgum questions. So I think he's more prepared, and I think he knows his place in history. And he has a huge shot at really saving this country. And I think he realizes it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Our problem isn't left-wing Democrats. Our problem are the weak-kneed, lily-livered, white wine-swilling country club Republicans who don't seem to have the guts or the fortitude to fight for the country. Very concerned about this in the upstate district of Elise Stefanik, where the party bosses in this special election seem to be poised to nominate a candidate who refused to endorse Donald Trump in 2016 or 2024 over fire-breathing, all-out Trumper Anthony Constantino. That's a story for another day. But the other thing I would note is that for many years, pastors would say to me that they wish Donald Trump would just talk more about his faith, because he is a man of deep faith, but he doesn't talk about it. Kind of like Nixon, he thought faith was a private thing. It's not something you campaigned on. It wasn't something for the political realm. But knowing him as I have for 45 years, I can tell you, in this sense, he is a changed man. He has a serenity about him, a sureness that God has given him a job. God has spared his life for this moment, spared his life for some larger task, that of saving this nation. And now he talks openly, as he did in his inaugural address, about how God saved his life and how he knows that he was saved by the hand of God. And but for an 1/18 of an inch, wouldn't he be talking about his presidency? So it is. I think it is satisfying that he moves forward. And I'll say this, Congressman, I think he's going to be a much greater president in this term than he would have been if he had been rightfully reelected in 2020. I think this horrible crucible that he went through, the tsunami of lawfare, the disgraceful and illegal attacks on him by Letitia James and Alvin Bragg and others who will ultimately be rebuked by the courts when it's all over, and their collusion with the mainstream media. They didn't just try to beat this guy in an election. They tried to bankrupt him. They tried to keep him off the ballot in all 50 states. They tried to incarcerate him. They're still trying to incarcerate him. They'll fail. But this has made him, I think, tougher, but more importantly, it's made him wiser. He completely understands something he didn't know when he first went to Washington in 2017. He knows how America works. He knows how Washington works. He knows how the two-party duopoly works. He knows that better a snake in the grasp than an asp in the bosom. And not all in the Republican Party are his friends. But he sniffed that out now. He knows that now. That's why you have this outstanding cabinet. And he's going to preside over the greatest single political realignment in our country, in which common sense Democrats like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, who's now become a Republican, people who believe in peace, people who believe in free speech, people who believe that we ought to know about the food that our kids are being fed, we ought to know about the drugs that are being prescribed for us, just common sense people who aren't afraid to say they love America, are going to join with Republicans to form a lasting coalition committed to our constitutional liberties. You have the privilege of being one of the fighters in this fight by serving in the House. I salute you for it, and I salute you for your record of standing up for the taxpayers, saying the things that nobody else will say. God, I am so jealous that you got to tell Jim Acosta off, and I've never had that opportunity.
Well, I don't know. It was like I said, a blind hog gets an acorn every time, and every now and then. And I would tell those people up in New York, you get with the guy that's going to support this president, that supports what's going on. Don't listen to these crazy polls that are run by the opposition. If I listened to those polls, I'd be an unemployed mulch salesman, and that's a story for another day. But, no poll has ever predicted me as a winner. I've always been the underdog, and it's because people believe. It's just like when Trump won. I remember Lamar Alexander asked me before a Lincoln Day dinner, and Lamar, he's not a, I wouldn't call him a ultra conservative like myself, but he asked me, we were looking out over the crowd, and he said, Tim, how do you think the primary is going to go? I said, Senator, honestly, I said, Trump's going to walk the state. And he said, what do you mean? I said, our people don't listen to the polls. They don't get asked the polls. Those things usually have a preconceived notion. I said, these people are, you ask the whole crowd and they'll hold up their hand for somebody. I said, you ask them individually, they're voting for Donald J. Trump. And he walked the state, Mr. Stone. And that's what I think you got to realize up in New York. People think like we do. Labor, there's a reason labor, black folks, Hispanic folks, all these women came out for Trump stronger than they ever had in the history of our country. Someone of his stance. It's because they're sick of the nonsense. They're sick of being fed a bunch of garbage. They're taking a leak on your head and they're telling you it's raining. They're sick of that. And we as a country, we've got this opportunity to take it back. And Congress is where it's got to happen, because if Trump doesn't have those people that support him and his ideas and ideals, then we've thrown it all away.
All right, we have to leave it right there. Our thanks to Congressman Tim Burchett for joining us. And folks, don't go away, because my good friend Joe Piscopo will be along just in a moment with Sundays with Sinatra.